So let's talk about creating memory objects, because this is the classic example. This is probably the easiest example until we get to numbers of this is silly and this takes too much time, right? We're creating these crazy memory objects and then we are turning them into a ridiculous story. So let's talk about the principles of creating memory objects so that we can get really, really good and fast at this. So at the very least, even if you still think it's silly, you don't have to believe that it takes too much time. So there's basically three methods for turning a DTR concept, a person, a place, a date, an idea or a concept like an element on the periodic table into a memory object. Method one is if you already have an image or an object for that DTR concept. That's the best. So you say balloon is helium. Great. Neon sign is neon. If you're trying to remember Winston Churchill or if you're trying to remember Abraham Lincoln, boom, you've got his face already in your head. That's something tangible that you can use. That is absolutely great. So we want to do that as much as we can. Then method two could be using the sound of it. So you may not think like carbon. I don't necessarily have something for carbon. So what can I do? It sounds a little bit like a car, lit thumb, nitrogen, maybe night dragon, but it could be anything. You might think nitro for some reason, or you might think hydro for some reason. We'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but this is your gig. You have to come up with your memory objects. My son and I got into an argument yesterday because we were coming up with memory objects for numbers, and he was arguing with me as to which number I should use. And I'm telling him, I get to do my numbers, you get to do your numbers for memory objects. So method two would be use sounds like. So if you don't already have an image, use the sounds like technique. Method three is get creative. Bear, eel, yum. That's kind of a combination of method two and method three, but this is what you can do. Lit thumb, right? What else did we do that was a little creative? I mean, fluorine, that's where we were using method one a little bit. I was thinking most people think fluoride when they hear fluorine, and then when they think fluoride, they think toothpaste. Oxygen tank is already there for oxygen. So that's the methods for how to turn an idea into an object. And this is where you have to get, sometimes you might run into an object and you're like, I don't know, method one isn't working, method two isn't working, method three isn't working. So you have to do something. And you're probably going to end up with method three. But the good news is that you're telling, while you're even trying to come up with it, you're telling your brain to decide to remember it. And if you only sort of need to do repetition on one or two out of 50 items, that's great. So the madness here is you don't need to be perfect, all right? Beryllium is weird. Boring is not boron. But remember, this is about memory. This is about creating an association, not necessarily about learning the thing in the first place. You're going to have to know what boron is. You're going to have to know the word boron. But if you can think a bored student, that might be your link or your hook for boron. So you need to tell your mind first that you decided to remember it, and then you give it a hook for where to put it so that you're not just trying to remember a few, 5 or 6 letters and a sound. That's not, your brain works better on images than it does on sounds. Images that you can visualize are the best. Whatever works for you, as I said, your objects are going to be different than everybody else's objects. You just need to meme it quickly. All right, here's a little test. Do you remember what meme is? Meme stands for make it memorable immediately. So when I look at my list, I quickly turn each one of those items, those concepts or facts that I've decided to remember, I turn them into memory objects, and then I use linking and storytelling to get them together. And so here are some sort of best practices. Make sure that your object is not too abstract. I had a workshop a couple weeks ago, and they were saying, I can't remember exactly what it was, which is ironic, right? But I didn't decide to remember what they were saying. They were trying to give me some concept about this object. And if it works for you, then use it. But you don't want to have something that says, I'm trying to remember neon, and I have a friend who goes by Neo, and so I'm going to use my first grade classroom as my object. No, you're too many steps away, at least from my opinion. That said, whatever works, works. So make sure that you go for something tangible when you're starting, and you're going to have better success. Second principle is make it memorable, okay? I have the guy dropping the car on the scuba diver. I have the bear eating the eel. I might even have the car running into the kid who's bored, because those are funny or scary or gross or horrifying, and that gross is better than dull. Your mind tends to remember things that are out of the ordinary. Now, you need things that you're familiar with in order to visualize them, but your mind likes to connect with things that are out of the ordinary. It tends to remember things that are memorable. Shocker, right? And then the third, and this is very, very important, and you'll see this a little bit when we do the Mind Palace, is you got to lock it in by visualizing it. When I'm working with my daughter on this, and I'm going through a list of 50 things, we were doing this on Spanish vocabulary. Well, if I can tell which one she's not going to remember based on how she's talking to me, because I can tell which one she's locking in by visualizing and which one she's just sort of talking about. And you've got to tap into the part of your brain which sees things. That is going to be the key. So the visual part of your brain is much, much bigger than the part of your brain that does verbal stuff like words. So you want to see it in your head and use that part of your brain. As I said, Memory Ninja is a concept. These strategies can feel like, wow, this takes a long time. But they only take a long time when you're starting out. Just like anything takes a long time when you're starting out. Your goal is to get good and fast to be able to deal with these things coming in. And you want to quickly be able to turn DTR concepts and facts into MemoryObjects, okay? And then one of the strategies is to then take all those objects and link them into a story so that you can recall them. So right here, it might be a good idea for me to give you another list and have you turn that list of objects into or that list of DTR items and turn those into memory objects, and then use your own linking to turn them into a story. So let's do that now. Remember, linking and storytelling can be one of the fastest and funnest, I'm aware that's not a word, way to link memory objects, because you can just, once you have your memory objects, you just create a ridiculous story in your brain, and then you've got this list. And then you can remember them, you can remember the order, you can say what comes after number 4, what comes after number 6, etc. But remember, you've got to make sure to visualize the story and the connections, and then you need to make sure that the connections work, right? It doesn't work if you don't remember that the bear threw the eel back to the kid on the desk. It doesn't work if you don't remember that the car bun swung past the desk. It doesn't work if the night dragon doesn't pick up the car. They have to have a connection in order for your linking and your storytelling to work.